Let's today is a special day in our course because, Lord willing, we will move to the next step in the process. We've been stuck on the diagramming for quite a while for good reason. It's a very important step. So what I would like to do tonight, if the Lord allows, is we'll do another diagram together from a passage in Colossians just to keep practicing the diagramming, and then move to the next step in the process. All right. So with that, as I said, I did want to do one example of the block diagram, and we'll do a couple verses from Colossians. And to remind ourselves of the specific steps in the process of diagramming here, there are the 4 steps. Identify the independent clause, which is usually at the beginning of the sentence. And then identify the remaining words and clauses in the paragraph. And of course, I've got our list of our familiar friends, the more common connector words that we will see. And then the third step is to identify or state how each phrase and clause functions in the sentence. That is, what word is it modifying? How is it modifying it? And then the fourth step, we will place the phrase or clause underneath the word it modifies. So let's start with Colossians here, 1:28 and 29. And let's see. I'll ask Fue if you could read these 2 verses for us, and then identify the independent clause in the sentence. Good evening, by the way.
Good evening. Yeah, okay. So Colossians chapter 1, 28 to 29. We proclaim him, admonishing every man and teaching every man with all wisdom, so that we may present every man complete in Christ. For this purpose also I labor, striving according to his power, which mightily works within me. Okay, so for the independent clauses, okay, so the first one should be we proclaim him.
All right.
Then the second one is admonishing every man.
Okay. We're
And
looking
the third
for.
one,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
okay, so and the third one is teaching every man. There should be 3 independent clauses.
Well, let's look at that. Okay, so you have admonishing every man and then teaching every man. Let's take a look at this. Okay, we proclaim him. So where's my subject on this one? We proclaim him. Where's the subject, verb, and verb?
The subject is we.
All right.
The
Good.
word is proclaim.
All right.
And the object is him.
Okay, good. So we have the subject and verb and the object of that independent clause. Now, let's look at the next one you identified here, admonishing every man. Now, remember, an independent clause will have a subject and a verb. So in this clause, admonishing is a participle, okay? So it's not a regular verb, and there's no subject in this case. So this particular group of words here is actually a phrase rather than a clause, because there's no subject, and the admonishing here is a participle, not a regular verb. It's the same for teaching every man. All right. So in this case, we only have we proclaim him as our independent clause, which stands alone in this particular case. All right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. All right, good. So that's how we start. We just identify an independent clause, and then sometimes as we work through the sentence, there might be another independent clause that we didn't realize or identify, and that's okay. But we'll start with this. We proclaim him as the independent clause. All right, I'm going to ask Dwayne here, put you on the spot, brother, and ask if you could identify the connector words here in this passage. So we'll have, let me highlight the independent clause again. So Dwayne, be looking for those conjunctions and prepositions, participles in the sentence here. You need to unmute yourself as well.
Okay, there I think I'm unmuted.
Hello, thank you.
Okay, so admonishing every man, and that's a correlating conjunction.
All
Is it
right.
not? And so that would be two equal, admonishing every man, teaching every man, that's equal. So there you have, what is it? Oh man, never mind, I've got to get rid of this.
No problem.
I'm not sure what that is. I've got to. Oh man, here, what is this? There, all right, I got that killed, all right. With all wisdom, and so that we present every man complete. Well, in Christ, there is a preposition in.
Okay, good.
Isn't so that is something that I'm not too sure what that is,
Yes,
but is that a
you're right.
preposition or what?
It's a conjunction.
Or a conjunction. And with is also something. I think that's a preposition.
Yep.
With.
Very good.
So we may present every man. We present every man as that has to be some kind of phrase. Is so that, let's see, is that a?
Yes. So that's here I can we go back to our list here. Okay. So that up on our conjunction list there.
Oh, there it is. That is a.
Here, let me do
that. That's a subjective.
Yes, it's a subordinate conjunction. Exactly. Let me throw this
Or
list.
a subordinate, SCB.
All right. I'll throw this list here so you can kind of refer to it as you're looking. All right. Any others that you see?
Oh man, do I go 29 also?
Yes.
Okay, 4. That is a conjunction, I believe.
There you go.
Correlating.
All right.
4. No, that is wabbits. That is a subjective. What do you call that? Subjective. Okay. Let me see. Also is something. Let's see. What is also? That's a preposition, huh? Also? No, that's not a preposition. But the also is something.
Yeah, one way to that I often will do is just scan, and I'll first look for the conjunctions. All right. And so you've got and, so that. Any other conjunctions here?
According to is something there.
Yeah, according to is a preposition. And then I look for the prepositions: at, with, in, for, from, by, on, of, and to. I think you've got most of them. I see one other preposition here, or at the very end, or near the end.
Within?
Yes. Okay, how about any relative pronouns? Who, which?
Well, you got a which there, which might,
Yes.
which
There you
might
go.
be works.
Okay, and then finally I look for the participles, which are the verb plus the ing endings. Any of those?
There, let's see. That's the participle. Let's see. Oh man, I've got my notes all over the place. But here, let me just see what that was.
It's okay. You see any verbs here that end in ing? They could be potential.
Teaching. Well, admonishing would be a verb too, wouldn't it?
Yes. That's notice admonish plus ing, so that's a verb plus ing. There's no subject and no article, so it's most likely a participle. Any others?
Well, teaching has a.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that'd be the same. That'd be a participle.
There you go.
Every man, every man.
And I see one more. Verse 29.
Striving.
Yes.
According. There's ing there.
Okay. And I think that's all of them. Sometimes it just helps to go through sort of a step at a time. So first look for the conjunctions, then look for prepositions, then relative pronouns, then participles. So if that might be easier to go step by step to do that. All right. So I think we have identified here all of the connector words. So then what I like to do after I do that is just break up the, okay, at each connector word, just break up each of the phrases and clauses here. I'm going to just do that at each connector word, because again, remember that the connector words begin a phrase or clause, they introduce one, but they also show where the previous phrase or clause ends. Okay. All right. Great. Thanks, Dwayne. Let me ask for Norman. If all I want you to do, Norman, is just identify here whether it's a phrase or a clause. Okay.
Okay.
We've already done the first one. That's the independent clause. Again, remember, we're just looking for a subject and a verb to make it a clause. Admonishing every man, is that a phrase or a clause?
Phrase.
Yes. There's a verbal, but it's not a regular verb, and there's no subject for this, so it's phrase. How about, okay, and is connecting here. What about teaching every man? Is that a phrase or clause?
Phrase.
Good. With all wisdom?
Is another phrase.
Yes. No verb there. All right. So that we may present every man complete.
So that we may. That one, doesn't it look like an independent clause?
Okay. It is a clause. And the question is it dependent or independent? The way we answer that is to notice that it's being introduced by a conjunction here, a subordinate conjunction. Remember, way back when we talked about these subordinate conjunctions?
Yeah.
Okay. And when we talked about those, remember that they introduce a dependent clause. Okay. Because they're subordinating, they're placing under, that's what subordinate means, what follows. So what follows is a clause, but it's dependent because so that works. Okay.
Okay. Dependent clause. Okay.
Okay. Now, how about in Christ?
Maybe a phrase.
Yes. Yeah, there's no verb, so you've got a phrase.
Yeah.
All right, how about this one? For this purpose, I labor. You see a subject and verb here.
Labor is a verb.
Yes.
I is a subject.
Yeah, so we have a clause here, correct?
Yes.
Now, question is it dependent or independent? Now, it's being introduced by this word for this purpose, so it's acting like, in this case, a dependent clause, something above it. It's subordinate to, okay? Now, striving, just a participle here in this case. So be a phrase. How about according to his power?
Phrase.
Yes. Very good. Which mightily works?
Another phrase.
Another phrase. And then finally, within me.
Another phrase.
So yeah, a lot of phrases in this particular passage. with a few dependent clauses. All right. Thanks, Norman. Excellent job. Okay, so now we've identified each of the phrases and clauses in this passage. So our next step is to ask ourselves, how do they function here? How do they work? What are they modifying and how? All right, I'm going to see, Paul, if you can take this step and let's just go through each phrase and clause and see if you can identify what it's modifying and how. And we already did the first one. That's our independent clause. Independent. Okay, how about admonishing every man?
Admonishing and every man is modifying proclaim,
All right, good.
or it describes how how he's proclaiming.
Yes. And again, with the participle, that can modify a verb or a noun. So you just have to ask yourself, what question or what was this answering? So this is describing how we proclaim by admonishing every man. Now the word by isn't here, but that's the implied idea. All right. Now, and it's connector. It's joining, as Dwayne said earlier, it's joining two equal ideas. So what ideas or is it joining?
Is joining admonishing and teaching. So
Yes.
sort of admonishing and teaching are equal,
So it's
equally
joining,
modifying proclaim.
those phrases with admonishing, teaching. All right. Now, how about teaching every man? What does that modify?
It's modifying proclaim as well. So it's,
Yes.
yeah.
It's a second how. All right.
Okay.
Good. Now, with all wisdom.
With all wisdom is modifying, admonishing, and teaching, since it's connected. Yeah.
Yes. It's modifying, admonishing, and teaching. That is the nearest verbal idea. And yeah, because of the coordinating conjunction and, it's most likely modifying both of those, admonishing and teaching. And how does it modify, by the way?
It describes what is being used to modify and teach, to admonish and teach. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's with all wisdom. So it's admonishing and teaching with all wisdom. So that would be describing how admonishing and teaching is taking place. Okay, so it's telling how, it's answering that question. Okay, so that we may present every man complete.
Right. Yeah. So that is a subordinating conjunction. So it's dependent on the independent clause proclaim, and this is like a purpose of proclaiming. Right?
Yes.
Purpose of proclaiming.
Purpose or why? Okay, it's answering that question. Why we proclaim him, so that we may present every man complete. All right, good. The next one here, in Christ.
In Christ,
Yes.
modifies complete because it defines what complete is, or rather it defines, yeah, the boundaries of being complete. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's about for this purpose I labor.
For this purpose I labor. For, again, is this purpose, then this purpose is of course the purpose of proclaiming.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so.
So yeah,
What is it?
or it could
Power-
be also for the purpose of presenting every man complete. I mean, yeah.
Okay, so it's purpose. We have the word purpose
Yeah,
there.
purpose.
So,
Right.
okay, good. Modifies proclaim, telling us the purpose of proclaiming. Now, it's possible it could modify present.
Mm.
All right, so we would just want to, you know, when you're doing the diagram, it may, and when we actually look at the diagram, we'll see that. Okay, striving.
For this purpose, I labor. Striving modifies labor. It describes how he labors.
Yes, how I labor by striving. Okay, if you can put in the word by and it makes sense, then it's telling you how. So for example, up here, we proclaim him, and if you put by admonishing every man, it's yeah, that, you know, that makes sense. So the participle is acting like it's telling us how. So here in this case, if we say, for this purpose I labor by striving, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So that participle is telling us how I labor. All right, how about according to his power?
According modifies striving.
Yes.
So
Very good.
again,
In what way is it modifying it?
it says how to strive, how
Yeah.
he is striving, and dependent on God's power. Yeah.
Yes. And whenever you see the participle or preposition according to, that's usually going to be a how something is done. That preposition, that's typically how it functions. It describes how an action has taken place. In this case, striving. All right, which mightily works.
Modifies power because yeah, which is a
Which power?
relative
Describing
yeah.
which power?
Which power, right?
At what kind of power? And then within me.
Within me again modifies power, and it speaks of the direction of the power, right? Or the location, yeah, the location of the power. So where is that power? Yeah.
Okay, so if it's where, remember earlier we talked about if it answers a question of where, why, how, or when, or purpose or result, it's going to be an adverbial, right? That modifies a verb. So if it's describing a location,
According to his power, money was within works.
yes.
Within works within, yeah. So it modifies works then, yeah. The modifies a verb, right?
Yeah, because it's answering the question where. Within me, where is it working? Within me, all right?
All right.
Okay, so some of those were pretty challenging. That was a really good job, Paul. Let's do the diagram and then we'll come back, and if you guys have any questions, we can answer them there, because sometimes seeing it visually can be helpful. So if I take my understanding of each of these phrases and clauses, I then want to place them underneath. Here, let's take what Paul had here put together. All right, so the next step is just now placing the phrase or clause underneath the word that it modifies. And so here, proclaim him, that's my independent clause, so that's going to be put to the left. Admonishing every man, we said that modifies proclaim. But I put it under proclaim because it's telling us how, and I'll just over here identify the question it's answering. This is my independent clause. And so, and as we said, is joining admonishing and teaching. So I'm going to put it under admonishing. So admonishing every man and teaching every man. And again, this is answering the question how. It's modifying proclaim. How do we proclaim by admonishing every man and by teaching every man with all wisdom. As Paul indicated, we look at the nearest possible word that it can modify and see if that makes sense. Teaching with all wisdom. Yeah, that makes sense. How I teach. And as Paul noted, because we have the conjunction and admonishing and teaching, then this with all wisdom is likely going to modify both of those words. How I admonish and how I teach. So that we may present every man complete in Christ. Again, so that this is a purpose conjunction, so it's going to be under proclaim. Why do we proclaim? Is the idea. And then I like to separate out my conjunctions just so I can see them better. You don't have to. Okay. So that we may present every man complete. Okay. And then Paul said complete in Christ. Okay. It's describing how we're complete. Another possibility is present. The idea of where we present. Okay, so that's one that we may have a question on. For this purpose I labor. As Paul noted, it modifies proclaim because it's telling the purpose of which I proclaim. For this purpose, we proclaim him for this purpose is the idea. All right, so that we put here and that indicate purpose. We even, like I said, see the word purpose in the statement there. Okay. Striving. Again, as Paul said, that modifies labor. It's describing how I labor by striving. And then according to his power modifies striving. How am I striving? According to his power. That's how. So it's not my own power, but I strive by his power, according to his power, excuse me, which mightily works in me. So it's which power. So I'm going to have to. Let's see if I can move this over as well. All right, which power? The power which mightily works. Okay, so that's which power. And we have, again, a relative pronoun there, which, that indicates, it helps us to know how it's functioning here. Which within me, all right? And that is where that power works. So it's going to modify it. So it's answering the question where within me. So it's going to modify the verb. Okay. All right, so this is our diagram for this passage in Colossians 1, 28, 29. Clean it up a little bit, and then we can, if you have any questions, we can talk about that. All right. So notice a couple of things here. I like to put these bracketed items on the right. It's just a reminder to me of how that phrase or clause is working in the sentence, how it's modifying the particular word. So I put those in just as a note to myself, and then I put it in a bracket just because anything that I add to the passage of bracket, I bracket it so that it reminds me that I'm the one, I put that in myself, okay? All right, so as we look at this particular passage, we notice a couple of things here. One is that we have the independent clause, as we noted on the left. So that's the main idea, okay, of this particular passage. That's the main statement. That's Paul's focus. And then from that, there are several words which, should line up here, which modify that action, which modify proclaim. All right, we have how we proclaim, admonishing and teaching every man, and then why we proclaim, so that we may present every man, and then the purpose. For this purpose I labored. What purpose? To proclaim him. Okay? Now, I want to do is show you from this passage, we see a structure here that Paul has put together, or that Paul has identified, not Paul, our Paul, but the Apostle Paul here. And one other thing to consider is whenever we look at these phrases and clauses, is that we look at this one, for example, for this purpose I labor. It could go back to proclaim, describing the purpose for proclaim, or another possibility is it goes to this verb present, describing the purpose that he presents every man complete in Christ. For this purpose I labor, to present every man complete in Christ. And I would say that it's more likely going to that particular verb because that's the nearest one and it makes sense. All right. So as I consider it, I would put it under the verb present. Now, there's still a possibility it could be modifying proclaim. And in that case, what I would do is this. If I'm not sure, if I have a couple of different options that seem possible, I put arrows. All right, so let me show you that. This is a way that sometimes you'll have a particular phrase or clause and you're not sure how it's functioning. So at this stage, just put the possibilities, and I do it by arrows. So I'll have for we may present is one possibility, or it could go all the way back to proclaim. Okay, so those two arrows there are a notation for me that tells me, okay, there's a couple of possibilities for this particular. And it looks like we're going to have to. It's a little smaller. Okay. So, I think it seems like for this purpose may be a better fit to the closer verb, which is present. All right, so that's what I reflect in this diagram. Okay, just cleaning this up a little bit, and then we can talk about if you have any questions. Okay. All right. Now, I know we did this kind of quickly, but are there any questions that you guys have about this particular diagram? Any piece of it or anything that doesn't make sense? Any questions?
Pastor Tim.
Yes.
Okay. This is for this purpose. I labeled. Is that the word also indicate this is the second? What is it? That's a reason why we proclaim.
Yes, and that would be a good. That's a really good observation. That would be a good reason to consider it goes with proclaim. So that could be a good case that you could make for saying, you know, I think it goes with proclaim because he adds that word also. All right. So what I typically will do is if I have a question on a particular, like in this case, I look at it and I go, it's possible it could be going to one of these two verbs. Then I'll ask myself, okay, what would be the case for it saying it goes to present? What would be the reason in the context? And then I would say, well, okay, what are the possibilities for proclaim? And so also indicates this may be a second purpose, for we proclaim. All right. And that's, I think, a very good, you make a very good case for that by noting that particular word there. All right. So you would have it over here, like we did, like Paul did before.
Yeah. Also, I just looked at Colossians 1, the few verses before this. It is about preaching again. So it's about the preaching of the word, and so the laboring and striving fits more with the proclamation, because the presenting every man complete is also the desired outcome, which is a byproduct of the hard work. So that's why I think Paul also uses the word may there. He knows he's not in control of the final outcome, whether everybody becomes complete in Christ or not. It is something that God wills, and he's the one that works through his diligence, but he has no control on that. So, but he can work on his diligence. So,
Yeah. Okay. Good. So that'd be another reason to consider that goes to proclaim. All right. So this would be the thoughts you would have is, okay, what would point it to being modifying present? What would point it to modifying proclaim? All right. Good. Any other questions or observations?
I was wondering about that. So that is a subjective correlator. Is that going to be just dangling there like that? When I was writing, my wife would always hack on me because I had so many dangling whatever it was. What is that, a dangler, or what is that? Does that go on we may present, or just hook it, just hang it there?
Yeah, that's just a convention I use to put the conjunctions by themselves so that I can see them more clearly. Notice I did that with the word and also. You can do this as well. If it's easier for you and just in how you see the passage, you can do it this way, so that we may present every man complete. And you can put it on the same line if that's easier for you and how you process.
I like to mark my independent and dependent clause at kind of the main hangers.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine to do. You know, you could do it so that we may present, and then if you want to highlight the so that, so it's, you know, you can see it more clearly, that's fine too. My convention for me is I like to put the conjunctions on their own line, like I did for and here. But you don't have to. That's just a style thing. So if this makes it clear for you to have the clause together with the conjunction, then that's perfectly fine to diagram that way. Okay, does that answer?
Yeah, I just wondered, because I like to have of course, independent has to be the anchor. Then you've got two de-dependent, they're kind of the second points.
Yeah.
Point.
And so you can have them on the conjunction and the clause on the same line, just like we did for this purpose I labor. Okay, that's perfectly fine. All right, good. Any other questions or comments before we look at the potential outline here? All right.
So back to the step before. So which mightily works is actually what is it? That's a dependent clause and not a phrase, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Yep. You're right. So which mightily works is a clause because we have the verb works and then the subject is which. All right. So yeah, I think did we misstate that earlier? did we call it a? Yeah, okay, so that's my fault. Good catch. So this is a dependent clause because we have the subject which and the verb works. All right, and that which tells us it's dependent on something else. So, all right, thank you for catching that. Good. That was good. So it's still, it's going to modify power in this case. It's because it's describing which power, but it is a clause. All right, great catch. Any other questions or comments, corrections that you guys see here?
So what does which mighty works? What does that tell us? Which one or where or what or how or
Yeah,
what?
it's describing power. Which power?
Oh, okay.
Power which mightily works. That power. So it's connected to power. Normally, when you have a relative pronoun which, normally that connects to the word right before. All right. So for example, he was, or let's see, that was the store which I went to. All right. So this is modifying store. Which store? The store which I went to. The ball which was green. Okay. And this is describing the ball. So normally these relative pronouns follow the word that it modifies. I was the preacher who preached yesterday. All right. So who is another relative pronoun and it's describing the preacher. Okay. So that's what's happening here. According to this power, which mightily works in me. So it's directly connected to power. It's describing which power, what kind of power. All right. If you go back to our discussion of relative pronouns, I forget which session that was in Unit 2, you can review some of those details. We talk about it there. All right. Well, let's take a look then and see now if we see the structure from this. Let me see if I've got a cleaner version here. Okay, so let's say that let's say we decide, I'm going to do this. I think that all right. So as we look at this diagram, the question is, okay, well, what kind of structure do we see here from Paul, the Apostle Paul? Clearly, we proclaim him as the main idea. That's its statement, and you'd want to identify how that connects to the verses above, but that describes Paul, and I call it the mission. His mission or his focus is we proclaim him. Now, the two ways that we do that, so we'd have an A and a B here, is how we proclaim him. The mission, we proclaim him by warning and by instruction, or something like that. All right. But the main idea is the mission is we proclaim him. And then there's two subpoints. And then what I did is just, then we have the so that we may present. That's his motivation. That's why we proclaim him. So that we may present every man complete in Christ. And then the third point I separated out from the next dependent clause, which focuses on his labor and the effort. And so technically, we proclaim him, that is the main idea. But if I were to preach this passage, I would break it up into these 3 points. The first being the mission, and then the second being his motivation. Okay, so that tells us why he does this. And then the third, my focus would be on the effort. I couldn't think of a word that started with M to match the others, but the idea, notice, is his focus is on the effort. And it is another purpose statement, but it gives the idea of why he gives this effort. Right? Labor, striving, the power which mightily works in me. So if I were preaching this particular passage, this is how one outline that I would consider using in doing that. So yeah, the mission, make disciples, a motivation to be like Christ, and then the effort is through the power of Christ. Okay, so that's one outline that we can derive from our diagram here. A second might be this, is if you want to make it more depending on who your audience is, you could have the preacher's aim, the preacher's motivation, and the preacher's effort. Okay, so if I'm preaching this text to a general congregation, I might use the first outline. And the second outline, if I'm speaking to a group of pastors or to you guys, I would make the outline like this, because I would direct it more towards you in that regard. So just a couple of ideas there just to show you how we get from the diagram of the passage to a potential or possible outline of that passage. All right. Any questions on that, or any other ideas that you guys would have for this one? Do you see how I made the connection between the outline points to the diagram? All right. Would you guys look at it in a different way? Would you see any other possibilities from, Paul suggests the method for the third one. That's
Doesn't fully make sense. I'm just playing with
Yeah.
words. So.
yeah. There's probably a word out there that would fit. The one thing, we'll discuss this when we are looking at putting a sermon together, is it's helpful to have like words that are they're parallel. So having a word that starts with M can be helpful because it can make it more memorable, easier to remember. But sometimes you might choose a word that's not exactly what it's saying. And so you want to be careful not to choose a word that is not reflecting what he's describing in the passage. And here we definitely see the idea of effort, labor, striving, works. Those all are focused on an effort. So yeah, method might not exactly fit, but so sometimes I'll do that. If I just have an outline and I can't think of a word that may start with that same letter that fits, I'll just put a word there that's closest to what the idea of the text is. All right.
Can we use this first outline, Pastor, that you have done? Because you did two. So my mind is just saying that if we can use this outline, and instead of doing the second one, we use it as an application. Can we do that?
What do you mean use it as an application?
That means, how do we apply this to our lives?
Yes. Oh, so to make the outline points directed to the hearer, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why.
Because
Go ahead.
because when I saw the two, the first one to me is like you are directly saying what Paul is trying to say and how it applies to us. The other one is like we are taking out of the text to suit what we want to say. I
Yeah, the
look at it
second,
that way.
the second one is more, it's less directed. It's more descriptive. All right. There's outlines that are descriptive, and then there's outlines that are directive. Again, we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but that's okay. The descriptive ones tend to be less application focused. All right. So the preacher's aim, the preacher's motivation, that's more of a description. It's not as much directed, but the first outline is directed, is more applicational because it's in the outline point. It's kind of telling us to do something, make disciples of Christ. So that's a directed application to my hearers. The motivation is to be like Christ. So make disciples of Christ, to be like Christ through the power of Christ. So that really makes a statement to my hearers, directing them in how to apply the passage. And so, yeah, I like the first outline better. I just was showing you guys there are other options depending on your audience, who you're directing the passage to here. So yeah, this is definitely more directed to the preacher or the teacher. But I think if you're teaching it in a congregation, the first outline or something similar to it would be more effective.
Okay.
Is that what you were saying, or did you have another?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Because as I was looking at it, it reminded me of what you taught us way back in the first session between exegesis and eisegesis. That is what I was thinking.
Ah, I see. Yeah. Well, and part of it, there's the art and the skill. When you're putting a sermon together, you do have the freedom to, it depends upon your hearers, right? Paul has an audience that he is writing to, but you're going to have a group of people, and it may be a specific group. You may be teaching a bunch of children, or you may be teaching a mixed group of people. You may be teaching a group of pastors. So you may be teaching a group of, teenagers or young people. And so your outline points should come from the text, but you may direct them a little differently as far as how you state the point, depending upon who you're addressing. Okay, so this isn't reading into the text here, because Paul is talking about his own testimony, why he preaches. And so by saying it, the preacher's aim and the preacher's motivation, we're not reading into the text. We're just reflecting Paul's testimony as a preacher of the gospel. This is why he preaches the gospel. But I wouldn't use this outline for a general congregation, because then it's too disconnected from them, right? You're talking about the preacher's aim, the preacher's motivation. Well, if I'm sitting in the congregation, I'm not a preacher, I'm like, well, okay, well, that's fine. That's your job. But it doesn't really apply to me then. That's why the first outline is more directed to a congregation in general. All right. So the second outline would be if I am speaking to a group of pastors or church leaders. All right. I could use the same outline up here too, but I might consider directing the outline more specific to them. Okay. So the outline will follow the structure of the passage. Notice I didn't change. I'm still going to be following the structure of the text in both of these outlines. Having trouble. Okay. I'm going to have the same, it's going to be the same explanation of each point, and there'll be the same, it's the same outline in that sense, following each main point or idea in the text, but how I state that outline point might be a little bit different depending on my audience, my hearers. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Pastor.
But yeah, that's a good observation, Norman. And I think this first outline is a better one, and it's a little bit closer to what we see in the text. All right, great. Any other comments or observations, questions? I'll have this for you in your notes so you can go back, kind of look through if something doesn't make sense. All right. All right, Paul's still working on some outlines here. Direction, destination, and drive. All right. Direction. What was it? Destination? Is that the? And then drive. Here, I'll put it down over here. Keep working on it, Paul.
I thought the point you mentioned about not just exegeting the text is important, but also exegeting the hearts of your hearers, because it's so easy to just be focused on the text, but not focus on the listeners, and we lose that relevance. And like this text, we've been thinking about the possible purpose of whether it's connected to proclaim or present. And I just thought, wow, this is important, because if, let's say, we kind of send a message that mindless proclamation is all we got to do, doesn't matter if it helps anybody or not. You just, and I think at some point in my life, I've just thought, yeah, I'm just going to preach. Who cares whether people understands or whether it makes sense to them? You know, God is going to work in their hearts. No, I actually have a responsibility to find out whether why they're not understanding and things like that. And because we want to present them complete in Christ. So I just thought that's a really important point to get across clearly, because if not, you could just send a message that mindless proclamation is all we got to do. And that's not right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good observation as well, because if Paul had just said this, we proclaim him, admonishing every man, teaching every man. All right, that's it. That's my job. It's just to preach the gospel. But he adds, and that's why this pastoral, there's a purpose. What's his motivation? Just to send out the message? Or no, my motivation is I want to see people become like Christ. That's what he's saying here. We may present every man complete in Christ. So my job is not done until I see that what I'm preaching has an impact in the lives of my hearers, so that they are now more like Jesus. If they're not more like Jesus, my job is not done. And how I do that, that's why I think it's important too, is that here again, we're reminded, no lazy preachers. Right? Paul says, look, I labor. And then he adds to that striving. It's this idea of intense labor. Why am I doing this? Because I want to, and this is where I think, one situation, it may modify present, but, why is the effort? I want to see every man and woman complete in Christ. And so I give of myself, my effort, and then he reminds us, but that effort isn't just me. It's an effort that I make being powered by the Spirit to carry out that effort. But all three of these pieces are very important. Obviously, the mission is this focus. All right. We proclaim Christ. How do we do that? Through admonishing and teaching. It's really a reflection of the Great Commission. Honestly, this is Paul's application of the Great Commission, I believe. And that's how I would explain it in verse 28. And then beyond that, though, Paul tells us why. What is the motivation? And this is good an instruction for us. What should be our motivation in teaching others, in preaching the gospel, in evangelism, in instruction? Why are you doing it? Well, I think Paul gives us the example. Am I doing it ultimately so that those that I am teaching or shepherding become more like Jesus. Is that my goal? Is that your goal? That's a really important question to ask ourselves. I appreciate that you brought it up, Paul. Why do we do anything in regards to ministry, whether it is preaching or teaching or serving? Why do you fellowship with other believers? And all of that is meant to help us, each of us, help one another become more like Christ. That's it. That's all that God is interested in, is, are you more like Jesus? That's how we glorify him the most. If you go to Romans 8, right, God causes all things to work together for good to those who love Christ, to those who are called according to his purpose. And then we cannot forget what that purpose is. What is the good in which God brings about everything, causes all things to work? It says in verse 29, those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his son. That's where it's all going. Why have we been saved? Why have we been chosen by God? Why did Christ die on the cross? So that we could be like him. Those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his son. That is the purpose of your salvation. Ultimately, to look like Christ. That is what glorifies God the most, when we all look like Jesus. And so this is a very, very important motivation. And just, you know what? This tells us something. Those two little words, so that, are pretty important words here. They may seem minor or insignificant, but they describe for us the purpose, the motivation for Paul, in this case, Paul's action, and by extension, our action. So that's why as I look at this text, I see those three ideas or points. We have a main idea, focus, that is the proclamation of Christ and how that is done. But then we also want to remember there's the motivation in doing that, and then there's the effort or drive. We're using Paul's outline here. That too is an important component, is as in the ministry. Other thoughts before we proceed? Okay. Well, thanks. Great observations, guys. Great questions. Thank you. All right. Okay. So let's, in the 30 minutes or so we have remaining, let's move to the next step. We'll come back each week. I'm going to have us look at a diagram together, just because we want to always keep practicing. And the more we do, the more we'll comfortable we'll be in doing that. So we'll keep doing that just to practice with one another. You have some assignments, by the way, in both Philemon and then your passage in Colossians, so you can continue to practice that way as well. And as I recommended to you before, if I were you, I would just start in Colossians and diagram the whole letter. Just take a few verses, each week or every few days, or if you want to do it every day, just take 10 or 15 minutes and just work your way through the letter, diagram the letter. If you do that, I guarantee by the time you get to the end of Colossians, you're going to have a much better understanding of diagramming and be a lot more comfortable with it. Okay, so that'd be my encouragement to you. And then if you want to check your diagram, you can ask me, say this week, Pastor Tim, I diagrammed Colossians 2, 1 to 5. Here's my diagram. What do you think? And I'd be happy to interact with you on that. So, but my encouragement, yeah, just take a few verses at a time and go through the letter. That's going to really help you to get this whole process that we've been doing. I've given you the tools, the foundation for diagramming with all that grammar, the time we spent on grammar. The purpose of that was solely for these diagrams so that you could know how to see the passage and see the structure of the passage, because it is that structure that is going to provide us with an understanding of the points that the author's making. All right. Now, one thing I forgot to mention as well is, it's not when you finish the diagram, that doesn't mean, okay, now I can preach the passage. All right. I don't want to give you that impression. All right. There's much more work to be done, but the diagram's a very big step in helping us to see how the passage is structured and how it's outlined. But we have more other steps to come that'll increase our ability to interpret this accurately. And that next step is what I call making textual observations of the passage. That means that now that you have diagrammed the passage, you don't just leave it and move on. We want to next take a few minutes and then make observations of that diagram or the passage. So let me explain, and then we'll look at an example. After you complete the diagram, take a moment, take a few minutes, and study that diagram. All right? Look for particular grammatical details, and I'll show you in a minute what those are. But this is really a structured focus on the grammar and the connections in the text. All right, you've already done some of that just by diagramming. You've been thinking about how each phrase and clause connects together, but then it's good to just step back and look at the passage and make specific observations of that passage. Let me show you what I mean. There are certain things that you need to look for. In this step, you want to look for particular elements within the passage. And one of the key elements is the verbs. You want to see what are the verbs doing in this passage, all right? The verbs drive the action, so to speak, of the text. So they are a key component, a key part of the passage. So in this step, you want to look at each verb and identify the three main characteristics of the verb. So what I want to do with the time remaining is, because verbs are so important, I wanted to spend a few minutes just talking about them. All right, I know we've discussed verbs before, when we talked about there are verbs of action, all right, or verbs of being. We discussed that, verbs of action would be where, an action's taking place, kick, speak, look, hear, walk, all right, etc. Verbs of being, right, is, was, become, will be, are, etc. All right, so but what I'm going to talk about here, the characteristics, the three main characteristics of the verb is looking at these verbs. There's three elements or attributes of a verb. One is the tense. All right. So in English, we have what's called a tense. What are the tenses of English verbs? When we talk about English verb, we refer to these verbs in reference to time. What kind of tenses do exist with English verbs? Anybody?
Are we talking about past and present tense?
Yes. Past, present, and there's one more.
Future. How about future?
Yes. Now there's some more technical, there's perfect and all these other kinds, but the primary focus in English is these three tenses: past, present, and future. Now, Greek has 7 tenses, if I remember correctly. Present tense is one, future tense, and it has several others as well. But for English, since we're looking primarily at the English translation, we want to identify for each verb, okay, is it past tense, present, or future? All right, that's one element or component. A second is the mood. We call it the mood of the verb. Now, that doesn't mean happy or sad or angry. Is the verb, happy? No, it's a different kind of mood. And this will be true both in either English or Greek. They have a mood. Let me tell you the different moods, and then we'll talk about. So we have the indicative mood. That is the mood of a description or a statement. All right. I hit the ball. That's a statement of fact. It's just describing an event. All right. So that's in the indicative mood. It indicates, it states, it's making a statement. Another mood is called the imperative. All right. That is a command. Hit the ball. All right. So that's giving, it's not making a statement. It's actually giving a direction, an instruction, a command, all right, to do something. All right. Another one, and this, be quiet. Okay, that's an imperative. All right. That's not indicative would be, I am quiet. All right. That's making a statement. But imperative would be a command, instruction. Another mood is what's called the interrogative. Interrogative. That is a question. Did you hit the ball? Are you being quiet? All right. Those indicate a degree of uncertainty, of doubt. I don't know, so I'm asking the question. In the indicative, it's a statement of fact. I know this. I hit the ball. In the imperative, it's a statement of direction, command. You hit the ball. The interrogative is a question. It's asking for clarification because the answer is not known. Did you hit the ball? All right. And then finally, there's another mood called subjunctive. Subjunctive. That's the mood of probability, or we might say uncertainty. All right. So, for example, I should hit the ball, or I may hit the ball. All right. There's not a certainty of the action at this point. Okay. In the indicative mood, there's a certainty. It's a declaration. It's a statement. In the subjunctive, there's some degree of uncertainty. This is something that should be done. This is something that might be done, right? You'll see that word might also. I might hit the ball. All right. She should be quiet. She might be quiet. We don't know. Okay. So the subjunctive is this mood of uncertainty. All right. Now there's a fifth mood. It's conditional, but we won't cover that really. We'll focus on these 4 moods. So verbs have not only a tense, they also have a mood to them. Okay. So it's the manner in which the action is being presented. You can present an action as having taken place, a statement of fact. You can present an action as an imperative, that you must do this. It's a command. You can present an action as a question. You're not sure if the action has taken place or not. So you ask it in the form of a question. And then in the subjunctive, it is it is a statement, but it's a statement with some uncertainty. Maybe I could put it that way. Statement with some uncertainty. Okay. Now in Greek, there's an additional mood called the optative, which is a statement with very great uncertainty. Maybe, possibly, I might hit the ball. So it's like a a much more uncertain idea, but we don't have that in English, really, just the subjunctive. All right, any questions on that so far? I don't know if you've been, Norman, did you have a question?
No, Pastor. No, I'm just looking at it and see it's quite tense.
Okay. All right, so keep these in mind. For English verbs, you'll have 3 primary tenses. So it's action that has already happened in the past, action that's going on now in the present, or action that will take place in the future. And then you have a mood. So here's an example of, so if we look at, let's do this. All right, I will hit the ball. All right, this is a indicative. It's making a statement of fact, but notice it is the future tense. The action hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen. I hit the ball is, again, a statement of fact. It's indicative, but it's present tense, or a past tense, excuse me, right? It's an action that I already did. I am hitting the ball. That's indicative again, but it is in the present. Okay. Did he hit the ball? All right, that's interrogative, right? Because it's asking the question. We don't know if the action took place, and it is in the past tense. Will he hit the ball? All right, again, interrogative. It's a question. And future. Will he hit? All right, so, and then as I said before, in the imperative, it would be in the present, hit the ball. Okay, that's a present tense imperative. All right, so keep those in mind. 3 tenses, past, present, and future, and then 4 moods of the verb. There's a third characteristic, tense, mood, and then the final one is called voice. Voice. I don't know why this is the word used to describe it, but it describes basically there's active or passive. All right. And in the active case, it is the subject performs the action. So as I've been using this one, I hit the ball. Here, hit is active. The subject's doing the action. Okay. In the passive voice, the action is being done to the subject in the sentence. So for example, the ball was hit. In this case, this is passive, as seen by the helping verb was. And this is describing here, the ball did not do the action. Okay, that, again, the subject of this sentence is ball. Okay, the subject is ball, the verb was hit. The subject is not doing the action. The action's being done to the subject. That's why it's called passive. The subject is passive in this sentence. The subject is not doing the action. It's being done to the subject. In this first sentence, in the active, the subject is I and hit is the verb. All right. So that is, in this first one, the subject is doing the action. We could also have, that's a verb of action. We could have a verb of being. I am, let's see. How could I? I am hungry. Trying to think of a passive. We'll look at a passage together. I think that'll be easier to do. All right, so we have these three characteristics. We have tense. So when you look at verbs, as we're doing the observations, textual observations, you look at each verb and you identify the tense, the mood, and the voice of that verb. Now, why are we doing that? Am I just hung up on grammar? Why all this grammar stuff? You said we were going to move on from grammar. No more diagramming, and you're doing grammar again, Pastor Tim. This is crazy. Well, it might be crazy, but the grammar is very important. We want to see, again, that is the means, the way in which we come to understand how the author is communicating or what he's communicating. And the verbs are such an important part of our communication because they're describing, they're driving, they're moving the action of the passage. And so we want to understand these verbs because it makes a big difference if you understand the verb to be an indicative or imperative. Is the person making a command or is he just making a statement? That's an important point, because if God's speaking, is he giving me a command to do, or is he just making a statement about something that has happened? That's an important distinction, because if he's telling me to do something, I better do it. So I need to understand is what kind of verb it is. And then also the tense is important. Is it something happening now or will happen or already has happened? And then the voice as well. So let me show you a passage that I think is familiar to us. And I want to show, I think this passage will indicate the importance of understanding these three characteristics of the verb. All right. So Ephesians 5:18. Do not get drunk with wine, for that is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit. So as I look at this passage, I want to ask, okay, what are the verbs here? Let's say I'm doing the textual observations and I'm now looking at the verbs. Okay, one verb is do not get drunk. All right. The second one is be filled. Okay, those are my two verbs here. Technically, there's another one, is. So if I highlight my verbs in this sentence, I have do not get drunk and is and be filled. All right, those are my verbs in this particular sentence. Now I want to focus on that third one, be filled. Okay, and let's see here. John Shen, are you there?
Me?
Yes.
Jian Sheng, my name.
What's that?
My name is Jian Sheng.
Jian Sheng, I'm sorry. Jian Sheng.
It's okay. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Jian Sheng, can you, I'm gonna put you on the spot here and see, can you identify for that verb be filled, the tense and the mood and the voice?
The tense is present tense.
Yes.
And the mood is imperative.
Yes, it's a command. Good. And then how about the voice?
Voice, I think, is passive.
It's passive. And why do you say that? What shows us it's passive?
Because this talk about the subject didn't do anything.
Yeah, notice that word be. Be filled. In English, that word be, when it's connected to another verb, is often indicating a passive voice. So let's talk about this. Thank you. Be filled is a present tense. Okay, so it's an action taking place to take place now. It's an imperative, so it's a command. All right, it is something that it's being commanded. It's not a statement. He didn't say, if it were a statement, he would have said, if it's indicative, it would have been you are filled by the Spirit. Okay, that would have been an indicative. Or if it were interrogative, it would have been, will you be filled by the Spirit? Okay. If it were subjunctive, it would have been, you might be filled by the Spirit. All right, but that's not what he said. He said be filled. So it's a command. It's a statement to do something. But note, and do something now in the present tense. But notice it's passive. And Jen Chung said it very accurately, that it is the subject is not doing the action, because be filled means that, so in this case, the subject, what is the subject here? The subject is you. Okay, it's the command, so it's implied, you be filled. Could even put that in brackets here to remind us. Okay, for any imperative in English, the subject, the implied subject is you. So you be filled. So the subject is you, but in this case, because it's passive, the subject is not doing the action. The action is being done to the subject. So the action is being done to the subject. And here it is the Spirit doing the action, right? Be filled by the Spirit. Well, this is a strange command then. How can we be commanded to do something that actually is being done to us? You see the dilemma here? The problem? He's not saying, okay, if it were active, if this were an active voice command, he would have said, you fill by the Spirit, or with the Spirit. Right? Fill with the Spirit. So you do the filling. But he didn't say that. He says, you be filled by the Spirit. All right? So it's a passive, not an active command. So this is, again, a strange, can seem like a strange situation where it's a command. And normally when you think command, you think, okay, you do this. All right? Like I said before, if we take our example from before, hit the ball. All right, that's a present command and it's active. You do this action. Okay, but what if I had said be hit by the ball? Okay, that is also still present. It's still a command, but it's passive now. So I'm commanding you to be hit by the ball. You're not doing the action. You're participating in the action, but you're really, the action's being done to you. You're the subject, because it's, again, the implied subject here in the command is you. But in the first statement, it's an active. You're the one commanded to do the action. In the second statement, be hit by the ball, you're being commanded to have something done to you. All right. So what does this mean then? When he says be filled by the Spirit, again, it's a command, but it is passive, meaning it is a command. So this is a command for something to be done to you. All right, so you need to, in other words, you need to let this happen, is the idea. So if I said be hit by the ball, what I'm telling you is put yourself in a position so that the ball hits you. Okay, I'm not telling you to hit the ball. All right, that's the first command. That would be in the active voice. If I say hit the ball, then I'm telling you, okay, you go and you hit that ball. But if I say be hit by the ball, I'm telling you to put yourself in the place where the ball hits you. All right, so do you see the comparison here? Then if Paul's saying be filled by the Spirit, what he's saying is you put yourself in the position so that the Spirit fills you. You don't do the filling. And the Spirit is not the content. He's not saying that the Spirit is what fills, you're being filled with the Spirit as if he were a substance. What it's saying is, it's be filled, let the Spirit fill you. Put yourself in a position to be filled by the Spirit. All right, so this is really important. We understand the distinction here. And seeing that as a passive voice is telling us, I don't go and fill myself. I'm not doing the action. It's a command, but it's passive. So it is, I need to put myself in the position to be filled by the Spirit, for the action to happen to me.
Isn't, Pastor Tim,
yeah.
Isn't the command more not for the action, but for the attitude then, to be willing to be filled? So,
well, there's still, it's still a command. So I'm being told to do something.
right, but there's no action, but more of the, putting on a certain attitude to be willing to be filled.
Well, there is an action here. It's just I'm not doing the action.
Right.
I need to put myself in a position for the action to be done. And so in that sense, I'm doing an action, right? I need to put myself in a place to be filled. So yeah, of course there's a willingness, but then there's also what are the steps I need to do? Like, so if I told you be hit by the ball, right? So I am telling you, okay, be willing to be hit by the ball, but you may have to do something to do that. You may be sitting in your chair and you may have to get up and go over to a place where the ball is coming so that the ball hits you, right? So there may be action involved, steps that need to be taken to put yourself in the position to carry out that command. Now, Paul doesn't give those steps here. He doesn't say, okay, you need to do, you need to open your Bible and read it and do what it says so that you would be filled by the Spirit. He doesn't say that. Now, there are actions that take place to put ourselves in the position to be filled by the Spirit, but Paul doesn't give those actions. All he says here is to be filled by the Spirit. Just like if I told you, be hit by the ball. Does that make sense, Paul? Or is that, so yeah, there's a willingness. That's obviously has to be there. It's a command and you need to carry out the command. You need to be willing to do it. But there also may be particular actions you need to do in order to put yourself in the position for that command to take place.
Right. So when you say the voice is passive, you're still saying that the subject still needs to be active, right?
Yeah. So don't think of it though. Think of voice as the nature of the verb in relation to the subject. All right. All that voice means, voice refers to the nature of the verb in relation to the subject. Okay. So an active voice just means the subject does the action. In a passive voice, it just means that the action is being done to the subject. Okay? Now, for the action to be done to the subject may need to be active in something, but not grammatically speaking. All right? Grammatically speaking, active means the subject's doing the action. And passive means the action's being done to the subject. Here, in be filled by the Spirit, we have a command, all right, but it's passive. So it's a command for the something to be done to the subject, you in this case. So, but for that command to happen, there is an implied positioning that I must do. Like again, I think the example, be hit by the ball, we would understand that there's possibly the subject will need to do something to put himself or herself in the position to carry out the command. So even though the subject is not hitting the ball, that would be active. The subject's being hit by the ball. So someone else is doing the action. The subject still may need to do something to put himself in position to receive that action. That's the idea of command. So as you said, yeah, to be willing, that would be part of it. That's just the idea. Okay, Tim told me to be hit by the ball, so I need to go over there and stand and wait for the ball to hit me. Okay? Yeah, it's a dumb sentence, but hopefully it makes sense. Right, if we're playing soccer and you're the goalie, then that command would make a lot of sense, right? Be hit by the ball. Don't let the ball go past you. If you have to, be hit by it, all right? So, but I think this command, be filled by the Spirit, is often misunderstood because people don't recognize it as a passive command. So I'm not doing the filling. It's the Spirit who has to do that. But Paul is saying here, there is something that I need to do to put myself in the position for the Spirit to take that action. And to identify that, you have to understand the whole letter to the Ephesians, and you have to study what Paul says about the Holy Spirit in the letter to the Ephesians, and then you will know what he means by this. Now, here's an interesting comparison. If I go to Galatians 5:16, there's a similar sounding command. He says there, walk by the Spirit. All right. Then he talks later about the walk by the Spirit and you will not carry out the desires of the flesh. And then later he describes the fruit of the Spirit. Now, if I look at this command, Paul, why don't you tell me what is let's look at the verb walk and what are the characteristics of that verb? What's the tense, mood, and voice?
The tense is present. So.
Okay, so it's present tense. Do it now.
Right.
What's the mood?
Ongoing. The mood is imperative. Is a command.
Yes, so it's imperative.
Right.
You walk by the Spirit, and then is it active or passive?
Passive, because it's walked by the Spirit. So.
Well, just look at the verb. Don't look at the rest of the sentence. We're only concerned about the verb.
I see. Walk.
Is the subject doing the action or is the action being done to the subject?
This time I always say it's active. Yeah.
It is. It's active. You're being told to do something, to walk. It's not being done to you. All right? You're doing it. Now, how we do that is by the Spirit. So that, in this case, that prepositional phrase is giving us more information. But as we look at just the verb, that's what we're interested in here. It's present tense, so it is ongoing now. It's imperative, it's a command, but it's active. It's you do something. You walk by the Spirit, whatever that means. All right. And that's something you'd have to understand the rest of the letter to Galatians. There are clues within the letter that reveal what Paul meant by this statement. But it sounds similar to be filled by the Spirit, doesn't it? But in the be filled is a passive command. Walk is an active one. And as you study the meaning of those particular words in their context, be filled has the idea of being empowered by or controlled by the Spirit. So don't do anything that would hinder the Spirit's empowering of you. In Galatians 5, the idea is you walk by the Spirit. That's the idea of living by faith. How I walk by the Spirit is, walk means how I live my life. It's to live. That's a idiom for live, in Jewish idiom to live. And so the idea is there is to walk, is to live by faith. But I have to go through the whole letter to Galatians to show that to you. But my point here is the nature of the verbs, very important, and we see what tense it is, the mood, but also the voice. The voice is very important to understand, okay, is the subject doing the action, or is the action being done to the subject? Now, there's a third voice. I don't know if I should introduce it here, but actually it can be very helpful. In Greek, there's a third voice. Greek also has active, passive, and then what's called a middle voice. All right. Now, a middle voice is the subject does the action to or for himself or herself. Maybe I should say itself, because it. All right. So implied in a middle voice, it will be the idea of let's see. If I were to say, okay, read your Bible. All right. Now, if it were the active voice, which in English, that's what it looks like. It's a you do the action. Now, in Greek, if it were middle voice, the idea would be you are doing the action for your benefit. Okay. Or if so, in an English translation might say it this way: read for yourself. Read your Bible for yourself. They might add that to express that idea of the middle voice. Another example. Let me show you. It's 8:30. Is it okay if I go a couple more minutes, guys, or do you need to leave? I want to show you one verse that this might be helpful. All right. If you have to go, I understand, but I think it would be helpful for you to see this. This is actually, I'm not going to look at a Greek text. It's a Hebrew text, but it has the same idea of a middle voice. It's in Psalm 73. I think you guys will be familiar with this passage. Right? Verse 25, who am I in heaven but you? Besides you, I desire nothing on earth. This was a psalm from Asaph when he was very discouraged about seeing the wicked prosper. And he's like, I was ready to give up because all the evil people are doing well. And why is this happening? And so verse 21 says, when my heart was embittered and I was pierced within. Okay, now, what do we see about these verbs here? Was embittered. That sounds like passive, right? My heart, I was pierced within. So that sounds like that my heart was embittered. It's passive. So the heart wasn't doing the action. It was done to the heart, right? That's what it sounds like. Or I was pierced. He didn't say I pierced. He said I was pierced. That sounds like the subject's doing the action. But actually, the type of verb this is in Hebrew is more of a middle voice idea. You know what he's saying here, brothers? He's actually saying, I embittered my own heart. I pierced myself. He's not saying it just happened to me, like, oh, I just sitting there one day and all of a sudden something pierced my heart and made me bitter. He's actually saying, I made myself bitter. Now, you don't really see that in the English here. You would have to go to the original text to see that. There's a middle voice idea here, and that is the idea that the author, Asaph, did this to himself. All right, so it's really not a passive action at all. Oh, not in Mandarin. So the Mandarin translation reflects that. The middle idea.
No, the Mandarin is not there. We don't have middle.
Oh, there's no middle voice in Mandarin. Okay. So in Greek there is, and it's very important. And I'll show you later when we look at an interlinear text. I'll show you about that. How do you figure this out? Because knowing if it's a middle voice can be very helpful. Because, like I said, in this passage in the Psalm, it's a big difference between saying I was embittered, like it just happened to me from the outside, versus I embittered myself. Right? That's an important difference that we should understand. So in Greek, what's helpful is you will see it'll show either passive voice, active voice, or middle. And if it's a middle voice, that's telling you that the subject is doing the action. So that's like an active voice, but it's also he's doing the action to himself or for his benefit. Okay, so again, if I say read your Bible, if I use the middle voice in Greek, that would have the idea of reading your Bible for your own benefit. Okay, now in English, we don't have that. So often you'll see words like himself or herself added in order to present, I read the Bible for myself. Okay, that's how I would present the idea in English, that it wasn't just I read my Bible, but I read my Bible for myself, so for some benefit for me. So that's what the middle voice would convey, that idea that I did the action, but I did it either to myself or for myself. Okay? So for now, though, when we look at the English text, we'll just identify is it a passive or active voice. When we get more advanced, we will also consider whether it is a middle voice potentially in the original. As I said, sometimes in English, the translator will pick that up and they'll add the pronoun myself or himself or itself, ourself, but that doesn't always do that. As I showed you in the example in Psalm 73, it just says, I was embittered. Well, yes, his heart was embittered, but knowing that in Hebrew it's called reflexive, it was reflexive, meaning he did it to himself. That's a very important principle. Whenever we are depressed or discouraged or envious, in his case, he was being envious, he did that to himself. No one did it to him. So my point in all of this is not just to give you more grammar stuff to worry about, but to understand that knowing the voice of a verb can tell you a lot about the action. And knowing the mood, of course, and the tense are also very important components. So when you after you do the diagram, because the diagram doesn't necessarily, help you uncover this. You just notice that, okay, there's the verb, and here's the phrase that modifies that verb. But in textual observation, you then step back and say, okay, what is this verb doing? What kind of verb is it? It's present tense. It's a command. It's passive. Okay, that tells me more about the action in that case. So after you do the diagram, the next step is textual observation, where you're looking at specific things in the passage. So one of those things, and I think the most important thing, is the verbs. What are the verbs doing? All right. And then you'll look for patterns. Are all the verbs indicative? Are these just making statements? Or are all the verbs commands? What is the tense of the verbs? Some passages, you'll see a bunch of present tense verbs and then a past tense verb thrown in there. That's a difference you want to pay attention to. Maybe next week I'll show you a couple examples. It's a detail and you might miss it. If you do this step, it's again an idea of making observations, looking for things, because just even a small detail, like I said in that Psalm 73, very small detail is, what kind of verb is this? It's reflexive. That changes everything, because now it's no longer someone who's a victim that, something happened and embittered his heart. No, he did it to himself. That's an important distinction that we need to understand. All right. Or be filled by the Spirit. Just understanding the voice tells us it's not something that I do. I don't fill myself. The Spirit has to do it, but it is a command. So there is something I need to do to put myself in the position to be filled by the Spirit. All right. Okay. That's probably enough grammar, pain, and suffering for today. We'll pick up next week, Lord willing. And sorry, I wanted to do one more thing. You guys, I mentioned this last week, and I'm really sorry for taking more of your time. Please forgive me for that. Just real quickly, I wanted to show you the schedule. Where we're at here is we're in session 3. All right, and the plan is we will meet the next 2 weeks to do the next 2 sessions, and then in July, discipleship lab, and then no class. I have something that I'm doing that week of the 27th, but we will have class the next 2 weeks. And then also I mentioned to you, and I think Dwayne brought this up at the beginning of our time tonight, that I have assigned each of you a passage from Colossians that will be your focus for, I think it's assignment 3.3 and the rest of them. So all these assignments, 3.3, 3.4, they will all be with reference to your passage. So assignment 3.3 is the diagram of your passage. Assignment 3.4 is, I think, the observations for your passage. 3.5, I think, is the word study. So each of these assignments is specific to your passage. Okay, that's noted here. It's also on the canvas as well. All right. So these are just the passages I've chosen for you to focus on. And Lord willing, if we can meet together, this will be a passage that I'm going to have you preach or teach and then receive feedback from it. All right. This will be in a few months. So don't worry. It's not tomorrow, but it'll be later in the year. Once we've completed the module, this will be the passage that you will have for you to preach from. And Lord willing, we can do that together. We'll see what happens. Okay. Now, I think I caught everyone. Oh, yes, I think everyone's here. If I misspelled your name, I'm sorry. Please let me know. I will fix that. But if you don't see your name here, either you who are with us or if you're watching the recording, let me know, and I'll give you, there's a few extra passages left over here that I can give you, okay? All right. Thank you so much for your patience and staying a little longer. I know it's late. Any final questions or comments before we depart for the week? Okay. Pastor Dwayne, would you dismiss us in prayer? And let's keep Mr. High, Paul's father-in-law, maybe in mind as well as we close in prayer.
Lord, we cry out for the brothers up in Myanmar, Lord, that you keep them safe, Lord, that may this be a learning experience to depend more on you and to cry out to your name. Lord, we would trust that this would accomplish its purposes, Lord, and that you'd preserve them and that they would enrich their relationship with you. Lord, we pray for this father in Vietnam, Lord, that Lord, they'd be able to minister to that family and to that man. That Lord, not even the neighbors and the friends would be impacted by their ministry in that place, Lord. As you use us, you have plans for us, Lord, and we are important to you, Lord. We rejoice in that truth. Asking now, Lord, to give us rest and give us the wisdom to organize ourselves and to be able to accomplish the purposes. Lord, we just cry out for these special days that, Lord, are opportunities to do things that we wouldn't have time for otherwise. That, Lord, we would not be feeling sorry for ourselves, but, Lord, that we would be actively preparing ourselves for your soon arrival. That we would be found with the wedding garment and ready with oil. That, Lord, that we would be entered, we would be able to enter the kingdom with a shout of joy and the reward of those, Lord, that you have raised up for yourself in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Dwayne. Appreciate that. And thank you for your patience, brothers, your diligence. I know these are not easy topics, but I know that we've taken a long time, looked at a lot of grammar and things like that. So I appreciate your perseverance and staying with this. Keep on it. I know this will pay off. As Paul said, for this purpose I labor, striving. So obviously he was speaking about preaching, but part of the process of preaching is understanding the text. And so there's labor and striving in that as well. So with that, I really appreciate you, men. You're a great encouragement to me. And I look forward to our times that we meet on Tuesdays together, and I'll continue to pray for you. But God bless all of you, brothers. Take care.
Yeah, Tim, you're a real blessing. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Tim. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Tim. Yeah.
All right.
Take care, brothers.
Take care, brothers. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.